Hey, what's up? My name's Tony. I work with the community and customer support team here in Portland, Oregon. Today we're taking a look at the new Acaia Lunar 2021. Before we start, if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button. All right, let's jump in. In the box you will find a get started guide, warranty card, stickers, the Lunar 2021, an updated heat resistant pad, 2 pairs of base strips, USB-A to USB-C cable, and a 100-gram calibration weight. Here's what's new to the Lunar 2021. USB-C charging. That's right, we did it. We did it. A flow rate indicator, improved screen brightness, an average flow rate display, and 2 ways to see the battery level. Let's get you brewing. To power on your scale, just press and hold the power button. To power off your scale, just double tap the power button. The first mode on your scale is the weighing only mode. The weighing only mode will not feature any icons or a timer. To tare the scale, just tap the T button. To switch modes, just press and hold the power button. The next mode that displays is the weighing plus timer mode. To start, stop, or reset the timer, just hit the power button. We're not going to cover all the modes today. We'll do a deep dive in a future video. Thanks for checking out the new Acaia Lunar 2021. If you haven't already, tap subscribe, and we'll see you in the next one.
Hey everybody, it is Steve here. For those of you who don't know me, I am the e-commerce manager for Acaia. I'm sure quite a few of you know me around the Discord server. So I am here today because we got a couple of really fun announcements. I'm really excited to share with you all. Just to kind of cover a quick few things, just to kind of give you a layout of what this stream is going to be like. Just first up, I'm going to do a couple quick introductions and just sort of talk about some general housekeeping stuff. And then I'm going to jump into a Lunar 2021 demo. That's the video that you just saw with the unboxing that Tony did. So good. We're going to cover a quick few features there. That is a product that we launched last week. It is an update on the Lunar Espresso scale. And I don't have a whole ton to cover there. The bulk of this stream is going to be covering the new Orbit grinder. So just a couple of quick things up front. There is a delay to this stream. I think it's going to be around 20 seconds. So later on when we get to some Q&A, I may not be able to get to everybody's questions in a timely manner. So just sort of keep that in mind. If you have some some follow-up question or something, or if I'm unable to answer your question, feel free to ping me on Discord or shoot us a message on social media. We're on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Acaia Coffee. We'd be happy to take your questions and answer them to the best of our ability. We know there's going to be a lot of questions as this is a pretty exciting and kind of different product for us. Also, I just want to give a shout out to the EAF staff for letting me do this. I love this Discord server. It's such a fun community, and I am delighted to be able to do, some Discord stuff for work. So having those two blend together is just, it's awesome. So shout out to the staff, shout out to the community. You guys are all awesome, and it's always fun to be hanging around with you all. And finally, for the Q&A portion, that's going to be toward the end of the video. My coworker Jen is going to be helping me out with that. So if you're in the community center channel, that's where we're going to be taking questions. Jen will help me sift through those, and at the end I'll just jump on my phone and we'll try to cover as many as possible. I expect this to take about an hour, so let's just jump right into it. First up, we have our new Lunar 2021 scale. A lot of you have been asking for some updates to the Lunar, and we've tried to incorporate some of the best ones and as much as we can. The Lunar 2021 is a fun and kind of modest, I suppose, in certain ways, update to the original Lunar. So if you have a Lunar currently, you may take a look at some of these features and say, okay, I don't really need to update. But if you've been holding out for a Lunar, this might be the kind of exciting thing that gets you to kind of actually take the plunge. Our footprint and our size is the same. So this is an older model Lunar. This is the 2021. We have the same dimensions, same overall size, same weighing capacity as the original model Lunar, but we have some pretty interesting updates as well. If you did already watch that video, you saw that we have a new flow rate indicator built into the display. We have a new Tare Save function. We have a flow rate average built in as well. A new brighter display, USB-C, finally, yes. Everybody's been asking for that, and we finally did it. So happy to oblige. It has been very, very hard to keep that under wraps as long as I have. So I'm gonna I have a second camera here. I can kind of plop this in frame here so we can take a closer look. I want to show you just a couple of things like the flow rate function. So let's take a look here. That's a little, I had a placeholder and then apparently it's wrong. So, the flow rate indicator that's built into the display, you'll see it at the top of the numbers here. It's a series of dots. If you have seen our Pearl 2021 scale, it's essentially the same, except we are advancing from the left side of the display to the right instead. Each of these dots is a 0.1 gram per second increment, with a few exceptions toward the end. So as you progress, you know, if I've got espresso flowing into a cup on my scale, you'll see this kind of advance. And once we get toward the very end, we have 3 bright dots that you can see over here. And these are representative of 3.4 grams, 4, 4.5, and 5 consecutively. Basically, once you get to 3.4 grams, we're sort of saying, okay, that's pretty fast for most people brewing espresso. And we have truncated it to sort of show you that it kind of jumps up much faster than that. I realize that some of you who do, you know, Sprovers or turbo shots might say that that's not, you know, your wheelhouse, but I think for the majority of espresso users, you're going to be looking at more in the 2 gram to 2.5 gram per second realm for a lot of espresso, sometimes closer to 1. So it does have, it's one of those things you kind of shoot for the lowest common denominator. It's possible we could add something in the future for fast flow shots, but as it is at launch, that's what our display is set up for. The flow rate indicator is available in most of the modes on the Lunar. This first one is the dual display. It is also available in our timer starts with flow mode, in our timer starts with flow auto tare mode, and our auto tare auto start timer mode. So it's basically available in those modes that we consider to be the most often used, as well as the ones that have timers built in. It's possible we could add it to the weighing only mode, but that would be something for a future firmware update, or possible something we could look into. So just for now, that's the modes that that flow rate indicator is built into. Now, I'd also like to show you the flow rate average, and I'm hoping that this shows up on screen well enough. I'm going to try to very slowly approximate an espresso flow with a pouring kettle, and just to kind of demonstrate this. Wow, that's a fast shot, huh? Okay, so my shot finished really quickly, and now we're done. What's going to happen when I take my cup off is I get an average flow rate, and then alternating it will flash both the shot time and the shot weight. This is a really interesting feature, I think, for cafe users. If you're not able to watch your shot progress, then the indicator itself is kind of, it's happening, but you're not observing it. Whereas if you rely on volumetrics, or you rely on automatic dosing of some kind on your espresso machine, you can take a look at the average flow rate at the end of the shot and use that as your point of monitoring consistency. So that's pretty exciting to me as somebody who has worked as a barista before. I know for sure once I get in the weeds, I'm not looking at a scale on my drip tray, but I can come back and still say, oh, okay, actually that flow rate is like 1.5 grams higher than I was expecting. So maybe I shouldn't serve that to a customer. So I think that's a pretty fun and interesting feature. You may not use it quite as much at home, but those of you who are professionals might be pretty excited about that. And finally, the last feature that I'd like to show you here is the Tare Save. So this is useful because it allows you the flexibility to tare either before or after weighing. Again, I think that that's something a little bit more exciting for commercial users, but I know for sure that I have those mornings where I have woken up 20 minutes late and I'm just struggling and I am not going to remember to tare. So if I can go, oh shoot, actually I have a tare weight saved, that's great, because then I can still get the weight of my beans or what have you. So the container that I have here is 55.8 grams. In order to save the tare weight, I'm going to hold the tare button for a few seconds until it says save. And there we are. So now it's saved. The first, the TR that showed up there was because I already had a tare weight saved. So it was basically asking if I wanted to tare that other weight from this. So now if I add some water to this container and I say, oh, it's 55.8, and then I've added almost 100 grams of water, well, now I can hold that tare button again and it will remove the tare weight of the container. So again, that allows you to tare your container either before or after weighing, which is, it's an exciting amount of flexibility to me as somebody who can see how it's useful on a bar, or again, those mornings when I need some help. And if the Lunar can help me out, I'm happy about that. So that's basically all I have to show for the Lunar 2021 today. We have a lot more details and information that we can cover, and it's on our website. We have some Help Center articles that compare the Lunar 2021 to the previous Lunar and to the Pixis. People ask that question a lot, like what's the difference between the two? And a lot of the similarities and differences are still the same here, but we have all three for comparison there. So without further ado, let's get into what's probably the more exciting demonstration, and that is the orbit grinder, which I have hiding behind me here. So here we have it. This is our new grinder that we've been working on. This is a collaboration with Weber Workshops. It's something that we've been designing and working on, and the Weber aspect is very much that they have plenty of experience in designing and manufacturing grinders. We've worked with them previously on other projects like the EG1 and the bean doser. So we've had a history with them, and we trust a lot of their feelings and opinions on kind of what goes into manufacturing a good grinder. And they've kind of made the mistakes before us, so we can sort of lean on that and learn from the lessons that they've learned already. So the orbit here, it certainly does look like an EG1. It has that angled design. We have a 250 watt motor up top. We're driving 64 millimeter flat burrs. It's a single dose grinder. The funnel or hopper, whichever you prefer to call it, holds maybe 30 to 40 grams as well as kind of into the throat. So it's not really designed for like big batch grinding, at least not at this point in time. It works very well for espresso. It works fairly well, I mean, even excellently for most filter brewing. And I've pushed it as far as Chemex. I haven't really done a ton of testing in that realm. So it could very well be just as, awesome there, but I haven't really gotten that experience. Most of my testing has been focused on espresso, so I have tons to say about that. I will also say up front that this is a prototype. It's a functional prototype, but there is a lot happening here that is certainly not going to be the expected retail product. So kind of keep that in mind. We have some cosmetic issues here, like there's some smudging and some finish quality stuff, and some other things here and there that are just not quite what we would want on a final retail product. However, it certainly has not impacted our testing, or at least hasn't impacted mine, and I've experienced nothing in the way of terrible faults or something that have caused me to not be able to grind properly. So just kind of keep that in mind. There's some certain things I could easily point at, like the front button here. When I get a close-up for you, that is a piece of tape at the moment because I pulled off the factory finish accidentally. So I've even caused some problems with this grinder already. Our adjustment currently is stepless. It's this sort of front wheel here. We'll turn it left or right. And it is a 0.5 millimeter thread. So one revolution is a 0.5 millimeter distance between the burrs. which I've found is excellent for espresso. It is plenty of room for dialing in. You have a lot of room for adjustment, and you know, kind of depending on the burr set that you've put in, you know, you've got a lot of range for sure. The little red indicator arrow that I have here, which might be hard to see on this first camera, is just a piece of tape that I've put on myself. We do not have like final markings for grind adjustment reference points or anything like that yet. Again, this is still prototype stage, so we're kind of testing and tweaking and all that sort of thing. Now, I have this grinder cleaned out and empty because I want to actually take it apart for you to kind of show you what's internally. There are certain things that I can't really talk about yet. They haven't been finalized, or we're still kind of trying to make a decision. But I will try to tell you as much as I can, and that includes in the Q&A afterward. But for now, I'm going to start just by taking this front cap off so we can take a look at the grind chamber. Unlike the EG1, we don't have toolless access currently to the burrs, which, you know, I think is probably a luxury that wouldn't make it to the final product anyway. The screws that are holding this on currently are 3 hex screws on either side of the front cap. So it's a very secure fit. It's nice and snug. I haven't had any problems in terms of misalignment to date. And I have taken this grinder apart a lot to work on alignment and testing burr sets and things. The burrs that I do have installed currently, I should mention, are SSP multi-purpose burrs. They're 64 millimeter red speed coated burrs, and they are really, really good for espresso in my experience. They're a unimodal burr set with kind of a different finishing edge. I think they were developed specifically for the Lagom P64, but you know, they certainly are functional in other grinders. So hopefully you can see here. Actually, you know what? I will set up my secondary camera for this and try to give you a slightly better shot of what's happening. Okay, here we go. Can we focus here, maybe? So what we have here is our rotating burr carrier down at the bottom. We have our set of burrs obviously here. We have our adjustment dial, and basically what that's doing is it's pushing the stationary burr kind of back and forth, or up and down if you like. Don't worry too much about this being wobbly. I didn't fully tighten the screw down because I knew I would be opening it up. The markings that I have here are just reference points for me. This one is full burr lock, and then this one is first burr touch. So that's, I think it's about 15 degrees apart, which is about as best as I've been able to get it so far. I have shimmed the stationary burr, and then we also have a cool little thing that I'm going to show you in a second here once I take this off. The screw that I have holding on the rotating burr carrier is something that we probably expect will change. Again, this is prototype stage. We're expecting a lot of things to kind of shift and be different. So we don't have totally final design just yet. And again, that's something I think, you know, just kind of keep that in mind for your expectations. If you can see here, I'm going to pull my stationary burr straight off. This is held in magnetically, so there's a ring here and then a few magnets here. Again, another thing I'm not totally sure will remain in the final version, but something that we're having pretty good success with so far. So here are our burrs. Just 3 screws mounted in either carrier. I saw somebody ask before whether we're using blind burrs. We are not at present anyway. It's something I suppose we could consider, but we would have to modify the actual carriers to have some pins and magnets and things. The really exciting thing, at least for me and probably for some of you who have worked on burr alignment before, is what we're doing for the burr alignment in our carriers, which is 3 alignment screws. I'll indicate them here as 1, 2, and 3. And basically the purpose of those screw holes go all the way through the burr carrier, and if needed, can contact the bottom of the burr and sort of push it up. So if you do a marker test and you find that you have a low point right here, you can open up your grinder and adjust this screw so it pushes the burr out, you know, however many microns you seem to need to create a more level plane. And then, so between the tension or torque, I suppose, of the screw on the bottom of the burr plus the opposing force of the screws holding it in place, we've been able to have really, really good and consistent, repeatable alignment in our burr carriers. I do have screw holes threaded in the bottom of my stationary burr carrier as well, but I don't have screws. So I've been shimming the stationary burr. Oops, sorry. This is like a little detent ring that would allow you to change your 0 point or reference point for the actual adjustment ring. It's unmarked. It's kind of just a proof of concept at this point. So don't worry that just popped off. It's supposed to. So we don't have the screws on the stationary burr at present, but it could be something that's implemented. Another idea that I think we sort of explored or have at least tossed around was, instead of using a screw, maybe the screw pushes on a pin or something, or maybe a plate that would kind of contact the burr a little bit differently. But so far the screws themselves have been just really reliable. I've had no trouble having very repeatable alignment using those screws and getting good marker tests. These are aligned not perfectly. I kind of cheated, I guess. I got within about maybe 90% wipe, so not a full 100% wipe on both burrs, but within about 80 to 90% on both, and called it a day. And it has been honestly pretty great. One thing that I'll point out, you know, as you're looking at this burr carrier and probably wondering how it goes back on the underside here, this might be a little difficult to see. We have these 3 little notches which correspond to 3 kind of pins on the grinder receiver. And these are not equally sized, and I think they're also not equally spaced. To my eye, it looks like they're a little bit off of 120 degrees from each other. And one of these is actually slightly larger. So when you do take off this adjustment collar and you put it back on, you maintain your grind position and your alignment every time. So if I slide that back on place, there's only one way that it will go on. And again, I've had very repeatable, consistent results in terms of the alignment and the results in the cup. I'll switch back to my other camera now. I'll put it back together and I'm going to do a little grind demonstration for you. So assembly, currently, I just slid my adjustment ring. Again, just slid it back on. It only goes on one way. So that is toolless. The magnets hold it quite well. And then I have a screw that goes into my drive shaft here, which I will try to quickly thread back on. I'm sure it's thrilling watching somebody screw in some screws. So I've talked a little bit about the grind quality so far. I do have a Lagom P64 myself, and comparing the two is, I think, quite a natural thing to do because we're talking about 2 grinders using basically the same burrs. I mean, I bought my Lagom, you know, myself, no discounts or anything, and I was sent this orbit by the company that I work for. So comparing the two is a little difficult, but I have to say they're very, very similar. At least the one that I have, in terms of cup quality, in terms of reliability for grind settings and kind of coming back later. Like, let's say if I started Espresso, go out to do a V60 or a Colita and come back, very repeatable on both. And my version of the Lagom actually has the same thread pitch as this. I believe they changed that to a 1mm thread pitch on later versions, and mine is still the 0.5 mm. So I've basically felt like I'm doing, like, you know, if the Lagom is kind of angled this way, it's sort of like the mirror Lagom almost. And I've had just very, very similar experiences with both grinders so far. The main difference is that the Orbit at present is running at 1,000 RPM. And the Lagom that I have, you know, it has an adjustment dial for RPM, so I can change the RPM as needed. And I was in a headspace basically where I would do that very often with coffees. So for testing purposes, I've mainly been doing a setting of 6 on the dial, which I think is around 1,100 RPM, just to kind of directly compare the two. And again, very, very similar results. So we have it back and assembled, and we can talk a little bit about how our Orbit works. I've got a 3-pin plug, and I have a main switch on the back of the grinder, so I'll switch that on. And then after a couple of seconds, it'll boot up, and then I can turn it on for real. So our front button functions as our on-off, as well as kind of take it out of standby state. We have a dosing cup here. I don't have any coffee in here, so I'm not really worried about it. I'm also going to make sure that I haven't messed up my grind setting. Yeah, about there. So, grinding is just a simple on-off. We have looked at app control, app connectivity. I don't really have any confirmed features for that yet, but we've kind of been playing around with what we could do, such as changing the RPM, auto start, auto stop, and we can even reverse the motor. So if for some reason something got stuck in your burrs or something, you could reverse it and try to kind of back that out. But we don't have any confirmed features for that. We don't have an app, ready to show right now. So that's just sort of speculative at this point. If I grab some coffee here, which I probably should have done a minute ago, just use some Skytop coffee roasters, local roaster to me. And we'll just grab, this is maybe like 9 grams. So this is an espresso setting. I'm turning the grinder toward you. We have currently a little knocker on the chute, which I think is a feature that will probably change. In its current state, it needs a redesign. And again, this is one of those things where you prototype it, you figure out, okay, it doesn't work quite as intended, and we'll probably have to change it. So the knocker right now, not our favorite thing. We might actually just switch to a larger chute that doesn't really require knocking, or change the knocker design. That grind speed, it is slower than my Lagom is. I don't really have a good reason for that, considering that I've had these same exact burrs in mine and have run it at a very similar RPM. I don't have an explanation for that. It's possible it's something we could work on in terms of like tuning how the motor is driving the burrs. But I don't really have any complaints. For a home grinder, that does not seem too slow to me. And I can kind of show you, I guess I'll set the webcam up again and we can take a look at grind quality if we like. So this again is, this is our multi-purpose burr set from SSP at an espresso setting. Very fine, a little clumpy, but not too clumpy inside the dosing cup. There's probably not enough light to see that. Certainly nothing that couldn't be handled with a little WDT, and again, in my experience, has been, very, very similar to the P64 and easy enough to work with. Just brushing up the grounds here, clearing off my space. Okay, and I'll switch back to my main camera. Now, I also wanted to just cover some of the probably more common questions relating to the Orbit, which I'm sure are release date, price, who's going to carry it, and what colors does it come in, and things like that. So release date we don't have yet. We are we're targeting 2022. For anyone who has worked in manufacturing or logistics or has been involved in that in the last year, there's just a lot of mess happening right now. It's very hard to predict when like a new product can have enough material and components to actually ship out at retail, or in what quantity. And so we're hoping for 2022. Basically, we're hoping to have a more firm release date or target release date in time for the Boston Expo in the end of April. So the Global Specialty Coffee Expo. Hopefully we can do that. I mean, really, hopefully we can do that. It's like almost 6 months. So we really want to have some more concrete news by then, and I certainly hope that we do. Price point, again, also is not firm, and that's for much of the same reason. Like we just don't have a complete sense of like what our materials and components availability will be. So we don't really have a firm price point. We've been discussing trying to get it, below 1,500, but I think it's too far away and too unsure to actually make a commitment at this time. Colors, styles, fit. Currently, we're just working with this kind of space gray sort of thing in keeping with the Orion. We very well will consider other colors for launch. Certainly, we don't want to. We don't want people to feel like they have to have something on their bar that doesn't fit the rest of their, style and equipment. So if we can make a black and a white and, an orange or what have you, like we certainly will consider that. The hopper itself, so this is designed as a single dosing grinder, which means that it is a best fit for home use, but we can certainly see some commercial use cases. So if you are single dosing for drip coffee or even for espresso or something like that. We haven't really done the like abuse tests for commercial use, back to back shots for hours on end. But probably for lighter volume, at least it would most likely be okay. It certainly feels robust, but that still is something fuzzy that remains to be seen. So I think we're definite on home use. We're hoping possibly for some flexibility with commercial. The funnel as well, we've considered and talked about the possibility of adding a larger hopper, something that could hold more of a dose of beans or even a bag. But that's something that, we aren't really quite at a point to figure that out. We're still sort of working on some of the fundamentals of the grinder, so that seems a little bit further ahead. And with that, I think I'm going to leave it open for Q&A at this point. Again, there's a little bit of a delay in terms of streaming, 20 to 30 seconds or so. So as I start to look over some of the questions, again, if you have something where you want to get a follow-up or you feel like I didn't quite completely answer something, absolutely feel free to reach out to me here on Discord or check us out on social media, send us a DM or a comment or something. We will be happy to get back to you. So I'm going to pull out my phone and start looking over some of the chats that we have. Okay, and again, thanks to Jen for helping me sift through all these. I haven't really been reading the chat just yet, but I'm excited to see what everybody's got to say. Okay, first question is, will there be a portafilter holder? We have not really determined that yet. There's not a ton of room under here. There's certainly room enough for a portafilter. If I take mine off behind me, I've got some room. There's definitely room under there. We just haven't really explored the hardware that would be necessary for that, and it's something that we can consider. I have brought it up myself, but also, that is something where, do people really want to dose directly into a portafilter every time, or would they like more flexibility? Like, how do we deal with that multifunctional hardware, the way that Baratza has in some of their grinders, or even like the Malkönig X54 has like a pull-out accessory for using a dosing cup versus a portafilter fork. So that kind of adds this complication. So something we will consider. Next question, will there be a manual mode? I'm not quite sure what that means, but currently, basically, the grinder is fully manual. We don't have any automated grinding features. which is to say that if you want the grinder to turn on, you press the button, and when you want the grinder to turn off, you press the same button. So it's fully manual at present. Can it do a grind rate profile like the Lunar? I'm assuming that maybe means like changing grind speed or something like that. I'd say that's possible. You know, if we have some app functionality, if we have the software capability of setting the RPM, we could probably do something where we change the RPM across grinding. I know the Option P100 has a thing where it speeds up at the end to help clear grinds from the chute, which is, I mean, that could be interesting. We just don't really have a plan for that sort of thing yet. Auger fed or directly into the grind chamber? That's a great question. There is no pre-breaker installed. There's no auger installed. It is a direct drop into the Burrs currently. That is something that we could change, but we haven't had any issues where we say we should add a pre-breaker up to now. Basically, it grinds fine, it loads fine, and we haven't had problems where we would want to reduce the load on the Burrs with a pre-breaker or something like that. Could there be an issue with warping the Burrs? I'm assuming that's with the alignment screws. I would say perhaps in extreme cases. You might see some tacoing where the Burr sort of kind of, this is a very extreme example, but it might kind of bend in the middle or something like that. The screws are placed relatively near, so basically the two pairs of screws, one going down and one going up, they're placed relatively close to each other, so the opposing force of the two screws against each other probably helps mitigate that a little bit. I would say maybe it's possible, but seems fairly unlikely unless you have a really large gap already between the actual bottom of the Burr and the surface of the Burr carrier. We're making very small adjustments, like certainly not a full turn of a screw, just a fraction of a turn to make a slight adjustment in the plane of the Burr. So I think, physically that is possible, but seems fairly unlikely. So here's a question that says, having little experience with shimming and aligning Burrs, what I've seen that people recommend is shimming right next to the screws, not between the screws. And this screw setup kind of imitates it. The screws, again, are very close to the opposing screw, so it is sort of a similar concept. I would say that with shimming, it's a little bit more complex than just looking at where the screw positions are, because you can have variation in the actual surface of the Burr. So you're trying to correct the full surface plane of the Burr, not just near the screws. Screws, I think, tend to be where more deflection happens, but it's not always the case. So I would say the shimming kind of premise there is a little bit more complicated than just that. But again, the alignment screws that we have are placed fairly close to the actual holding screws, which seems to at least kind of correlate with that position. Any chance for PID controlled auto off? That again is something that we could explore. I mean, it's not really a PID, I don't think. That's a specific type of logic controller where we could consider something else. But the gist being that we could have an auto off or some kind of auto function with grind speed, I think is potentially there. It's something that we would be happy to explore. And just as with many other things, we're too far out to be able to commit to that. So, I mean, again, thank you for the suggestion. Love to hear the enthusiasm for different features that a new grinder might have. Does it stall if you turn it on with Prady beans in it? So the standard calibration coffee that I have been using is Tim Wendelbo's Finca Tamana, and actually I've been using the filter roast. I don't have any with me currently. I have more of the actual espresso roast on the way, but we definitely took a look and we said we want to be able to service certainly our customers worldwide, no matter what their coffee preferences might be. So if you are roasting, really light coffees, Nordic style, wheatgrass if you like, very light coffees that are dense and very hard for Burrs to process, we are pretty much planning for this to be dump in that dose and go. In my experience with this Burr set, that has been the case. I can throw in an 18-gram dose, of Tim Wendelboe of that Finca Tamana, and our target shot parameters have been 18 grams in to 50 out. And my machine, which you probably can't really see behind me, I have an E61 with a flow control knob. I have set that in one static position, basically, like my reference position, which I don't recall the flow rate actually, but I can get back to you on that. Basically pulling shots at one static flow rate to get 18 in to 50 out in about 30 to 35 seconds. And I've been getting extractions as high as 24.5% that way, and no problems from the grinder itself. So as far as I'm concerned, that is an extremely satisfactory result, and I hope that we can keep that up for production. Keep going. Let's see, we have Micron indicators instead of numbers. I'm assuming that's for the adjustment dial. We haven't really settled on that yet. I think Micron indicators could be interesting since we do, we've played around with this idea of a settable 0 point on the actual adjustment dial. So if we do have the ability to set a scale and you can zero out your burrs, set your 0 point there and keep it there, then a Micron adjustment could be pretty interesting because we do have a consistent thread advancement across the dial. So that could be something to consider. Yeah, I mean, that's something we can definitely consider. RGB LED for the front. Maybe we could consider it. I don't know. That would be really fun. Like have it sync up with your Philips Hue or your Corsair keyboard or something like that. That would be kind of fun. I'd love to have like a gamer coffee set up one day. Do you need to do RDT? I have not. I have not done it at all with this grinder. Part of that is it's a prototype and I don't want to rust anything. But I haven't done it at all. I have no problems with static, at least so far. I mean, it is autumn in upstate New York for me, so we have a bit of humidity happening, but not really extreme dryness like we would see in a few months in winter. So it's possible that static might become an issue, but for now, I haven't had any problems with it. So I haven't been doing it. And RDT, by the way, is Ross Droplet Technique, where you add a little bit of water to your beans. I use a little mister sprayer like this. Let's see, what else? Any thoughts on integration with the magic tumbler like the key grinder? I feel like that's unlikely. I think that is a big hardware change for us. It would probably require us to have a higher sort of shank to the grinder, raise the overall height. That seems a little bit like, a Weber design that will work for Weber products, and we're an Acaia product, so we're going to do some different things. Somebody has asked if we could add a hand crank to turn it into a manual grinder. I love your enthusiasm. I think that's probably a no at this point, but something we could shelf for further consideration. I know that, I think Etzinger has a manual crank, Etzmax, or I'm sorry, an Etzman, because it's a manual grinder, which is delightful. It's a little absurd, but very entertaining. So maybe that is something that we could consider in the future. Retention. I'm sorry, I totally missed this already. Retention is a little high in my opinion right now, but actually not that bad. The last time that I fully cleaned out everything, I recovered 1.4 grams of coffee. And that is from the sweeps around the rotating burr carrier, all the little crevices in the burrs, the screws and everything. I sweeped it all out into a piece of paper, collected it, and threw it into a dosing cup on a scale, and it was 1.4 grams. That is like 75% more than my P64 has. In that, I usually have close to like 0.8 to 0.9 grams when I do a full clean out like that. So, that's not terrible. Looking at where it collects, I don't expect a ton of exchange to occur, but that's the total retention. And I think, we could probably try to get that down with some design revisions. It might also be part of the fact that, this is a prototype. The machining may not be quite what we expect for the final version. So there's probably a good chance that we can get that down. I would like to see it at a gram or below. So I feel like that's a good goal to set. For app features, have we considered exposing the grind setting via Bluetooth so that apps for tracking shots could pick up the grind setting automatically? That would be really interesting. I don't think that we have really a mechanical design that would work for a sensor like that at present. But I could see how that would be really helpful for people who love data. You know, if we already have a connected grinder, could we send the grind setting to an app or to some kind of data collection point? I'll be happy to pass that on. I think that might be maybe a little outside scope, but something that we could consider for now. So thanks for that suggestion. That's a really interesting point. And that is all the questions we have collected for now. Let me take a quick scan of Discord and see if there's anything I can kind of back up and catch. There's a lot to catch up on. You guys, thank you all for showing up, by the way. This is fantastic. I'm so happy that this turned out. I've been kind of nervous that I'd be presenting to like 5 people, so it's great to see, you know, a whole bunch in the chat, and you know, I love the enthusiasm. Oh, okay, here we got a new one. Any noticeable improvements or features compared to an existing grinder at the same level? So I've mentioned that I have a Lagom P64, which, if you'll bear with me one second, I will grab and put next to the grinder. Can't turn it on because I've just unplugged it, and I'm not going to try to grab that plug. So, you know, in terms of footprint, we're very similar. I'll try to get this a little bit more front-facing for you. Very similar footprint. You know, we have a very comparable width. We have a little bit higher platform on the Orbit. The Lagom is actually heavier. I don't know by how much, but it is a little bit heavier. And of course, the design is slightly different. But these are both 64 millimeter flat burr grinders that use the same burr sets and are fairly comparable in terms of RPM. I don't think we're really trying to be, you know, a P64 killer or something. I think we're trying to sort of, this is our first grinder, right? So we've kind of got a lot to prove, I think, and we don't necessarily want to go straight for a competitor in terms of like trying to knock them down a peg or something. We want to make a really good product that people will enjoy. And we want to do it kind of in our own way, where our expertise has a lot to do with software and weighing technology and, you know, I suppose app connectivity to a certain extent. So this is a bit of a branching out for us. And again, we want to be careful not to misstep. And I think a misstep would clearly be to try to like go directly and like compare to a competitor, or again, try to like be the king of the playing field or something. We certainly wouldn't complain if that happened, but I think our goal again is to make a really solid product that people will love. So again, you know, I've spoken a little bit about the grind adjustment basically being the same as my Lagom. I've had a lot of espressos that taste almost exactly the same. Like I probably could not pick them out side by side between the two grinders at this point. It is, I mean, it's very similar grind quality. It's a fairly similar adjustment experience, but it's a different overall user experience. It's, I mean, I think it's more similar to an EG1 in certain ways than it is to a Lagom. So I don't have experience with the DF64. I don't have experience with the fellow Ode. I can't really speak to how those compare. Apart from, you know, there are certain differences in design, certainly. You know, I think the Ode is a bit sort of squatter and more compact than this would be, despite having a similar size burr set. So I can't really comment on the differences between those. I could talk about maybe some of the commercial grinders that I've used in the past, but I don't think that they're really fair comparisons because they're not intended for single dosing the way that this has been. So I think currently, you know, the comparison to the P64 is the most apt, and for me, it has been a very similar experience. And let's see, follow up on retention, dose consistency. Just to kind of clarify, retention has a few ways that it's used as a term in terms of when it comes to discussing grinders. Some people look at retention as the total coffee retained by the grinder, basically between cleanings. Some people are looking more for like dose by dose retention. So if I put 19 grams into the hop or into the funnel, what do I get out? And some people are also considering retention and kind of concerned with exchange of coffee. So if there is a bunch of old ground coffee retained in this grinder, how much of it works into my new fresh dose today? So there's kind of different ways to look at retention. Again, that total retention is around 1.5 grams or a little bit shy of that. My dose to dose retention is none. If I put 18 grams in, I'm getting 18 grams out. I can't really say how much of that is exchanged. I think that's really hard to qualify, but I have not had issues in terms of, you know, let's say my first shot of the day and I haven't cleaned out the grinder from the day before. My first shot of the day, I put 18 grams in, I get 18 grams out, and I get, you know, a 35-second shot. The very next one after that will be within like 2 seconds. It's very consistent. So I have reason to believe that retention, you know, being what it is, I don't think there's a lot of exchange happening, and I don't really think there's a lot of dose-to-dose retention either. What's the most enjoyable and most annoying user experience with the Orbit prototype right now? I have to say it's a little tough to use a prototype that, for example, has no reference points in the adjustment mechanism. So again, I had to add this red indicator arrow. I don't have any reference points on my adjustment dial except the ones that I have added. Once I have added reference points, that's a lot easier to use. But you have to, when you're using a prototype, you have to sort of design what your intended user experience is going to be, at least something of this stage. So, you know, for me, I came in this with curiosity as well as kind of an interest in seeing how I can help shape it. But yeah, there's definitely been some things where I'm like, oh, okay. So that was a little, I mean, it's not really like a roadblock. It's just like, oh, okay, I have to do this, and I haven't had to do that on a grinder before. I really don't like the knocking arm, and that's just because the design is in need of correcting and refinement. So that's a little frustrating. It does work. It's just that, you know, you don't flick it. You have to like really kind of get into it and also bring it back up if the spring isn't quite grabbing it right. So that's, I mean, again, that's something we already know about and we're planning on adjusting. The most enjoyable part, honestly, is the alignment. I've aligned a lot of burrs. I've done that. I can't even remember how many times. And this, it's not a total like replacement for shimming. You know, it's still doing the same thing. You're not completely simplifying the process. But for me, shimming is somewhat annoying because even if you know the thickness of your shim stock, unless you have a dial indicator and like precision tools to figure out exactly how much your burr is off, you probably aren't doing a marker test in that case. But it's just too much trial and error. I don't like that part. And placing shims and then readjusting them or stacking them or what have you after you've done subsequent marker tests, turning a screw is so much easier. So I've really enjoyed that aspect. That is probably my favorite part about this grinder right now, aside from just being able to get really tasty espresso out of it. Here's a good question. If a similar experience to the P64 and around the same price, what's the reason to do this? Why would somebody buy this over a P64? I have to say, I can't really answer that yet. I don't have a solid answer for that yet because we haven't arrived at a final price. We haven't really arrived at final features yet. Obviously, the 64 millimeter burr, like flat burr grinder arena is, you know, it's getting more crowded. I think there's still plenty of room there. And I don't think that necessarily price point is the only reason somebody buys a product. You know, I've got no knocks against Option O. Again, I own their product and I really love it, but it's really hard to buy if you're in the US or even elsewhere. So maybe availability is our edge. I don't really know. I can't predict that at this point. You know, as we continue to refine and develop, I think we certainly will keep everybody else's products in mind for how we can differentiate ourselves. But yeah, I don't really have a good answer for that yet. I know that might be a little disappointing, but I think it is still sort of early. You know, we have room to play and tweak and make things a little bit better before we actually bring it to market. So yeah, I think that there's potential there. Here's a question about the alignment out of the box, and kind of paired with that, the micrometers per screw turn for the alignment screws. The objective out of the box is that you don't have to align the grinder. I mean, I think it's still too early to say like what we plan to do for that, but that has been a persistent question for me, is how do we make sure that this, you know, the grinder that you receive is ready to go? The alignment screws to me feel like, you know, not only is it something that our QC team would use to make sure that the burrs are aligned when we ship, but also there's something that is available for users who want to swap burrs. You know, we have, I think we've discussed a few times like what burrs do we want to ship with this and what burrs do we want to have available, and we haven't settled on anything specific just yet, or at least we don't have something to announce yet. So, I mean, that's the reason that I've been using multiple burr sets in mine, is testing what works and how well it works and how easy is it to align and what is the flavor quality that we get out of it. And I mean, so far, everything from SSP has been fine. I've heard we put Mazur burrs in one and it went fine. And like, okay, so what does that mean? We want to have some flexibility, so that's what the alignment screws are for. But when we ship somebody a grinder, we don't want to be like, okay, here's a kit and you put some burrs in it and then you tweak it and then you can start grinding. No, we want you to have a complete product. We want you to open the box, set it up, turn it on, and have a good experience. So yeah, I don't know the specifics of what that will be yet, but I know that our goals are that, you know, just like with our scales, it should turn on and work the first time that you open it. And the micrometers for the adjustment screws, I don't actually know. I don't know the thread pitch currently. I have actually requested that we consider a finer thread pitch. So, you know, you can make a slightly larger turn of the screw for the same amount of adjustment. So unfortunately, I could probably find that out. I could probably find out what the thread pitch is currently, but I would actually expect it to change. And let's see. Any specific goals in mind when coming up with the idea of a collaboration with Weber? That's a great question. I touched on earlier that we do have a history with Weber. We have worked with them on the EG1 on software, I think some hardware as well. We've worked with them on their bean counter. We have, you know, kind of a friendship, I suppose, established with Weber. And you know, this is not a Weber product. This is an Acaia product. This is Acaia's first grinder. And we have been collaborating with Weber, to my knowledge, in the capacity of assisting with design and kind of trying to avoid some mistakes and, you know, just kind of helping get a leg up on our first project in the field that they're familiar with. So I can't really comment on the full extent of the partnership, but I would say that, you know, Weber's involvement is supportive. You know, they're helping us to make a grinder, and, you know, we're happy to put their branding on it to acknowledge that collaboration while also saying, yeah, it's an Acaia product still. So I hope that answers the question. I know that that's, you know, Weber has the key grinder that's coming out, and, you know, this might feel like something that they're also kind of co-announcing as if it's a new Weber product as well. But I want to stress that it is an Acaia product, and we also still like, we still want to acknowledge that Weber's involved. So it's, I don't know. I suppose the ownership is potentially a little confusing there, but I'll also say, so kind of the reason that we're doing this live stream is because we didn't go to Coffee Expo this year. We just kind of decided that for the sake of the health and safety of our team, we wanted to kind of avoid a large congregation at this point. We would have been co-exhibiting with Weber, so we would have had this, on display in our booth with Weber's key and the HD2 and probably our other scales and things. So we probably could have jointly talked a little bit about what that collaboration would have been at that point. So this I think is a little bit it might be perhaps a little bit more misleading than the planned presentation, so maybe that helps clear things up as well. Can we convince Acaia to make the motor position adjustable to address lower burr alignment? I mean, the motor position, I don't think I've ever seen a grinder that has an adjustable motor position, but I mean, hey, that could be interesting. Something I can pass on. I'm not really sure what the design would look like if that were the case, but yeah, I don't know. I'm happy to pass on anything worth considering. And will there be pre-orders? This is going to be the last question, by the way. Will there be pre-orders? I think it's still too far out to really say for sure. We are, again, we're hoping to have a more concrete launch date by the end of April next year. Pre-orders are something that we've kind of, we haven't done a ton in the past. It's possible that we could definitely kind of keep an open mind about it. But it's certainly a lot easier to say that we have the product ready to go and here it is and it's for sale right now. So yeah, I mean, potentially, I suppose, but it might be too early to really plan on it, is probably my answer there. Okay, so that will wrap up our Q&A for now. We've reached the top of the hour, and I just want to thank you all again for tuning in. This has been wonderful. I'm so happy to have been able to show you the Orbit and the Lunar 2021 today. Again, if you do have any follow-up questions, if I didn't get to your question or you just want to know more, feel free to ping me on Discord, or you can shoot us a comment or a DM on any of our social media channels. We are at Acaia Coffee. Thank you again for tuning in, and I hope you all have a great day.